welcome to another episode of Newcastle Unlocked. I'm your host, Brent Sinclair, and today we've got someone joining us who's been at the heart of the city's transformation over the past decade, Nuatali Nelmes, former Lord Mayor of Newcastle, and has recently joined the Property Council of Australia as Director for Newcastle on the Hunter. So thanks for joining us today, Nuatali.
Pleasure to be with you.
So look, in today's episode, we really want to talk about Nuatali's new role, a decade of leading the city through some of the biggest changes that we've ever seen, and talk about what the plans are for your new role as Property Council and where you see the Hunter heading and why it's such a great place to invest. So I think we'll dive into it. So look, it's been a bit over 12 months since you stepped away from your role as Lord Mayor, and curious to find what you've been doing since then and what led you to the Property Council.
Yeah, I really loved 10 years leading the city through such transformation and saw how important the whole development and property sector was to the growth of the city, and engaging at that level, but also engaging with community to see the city grow, to bring the amenity to the city, and also having the City of Newcastle play quite a significant role in infrastructure upgrades and investing in public amenity that then allowed the private sector to match that investment.
Mhm.
Those partnerships are so important, and the advocacy work that the Property Council does right across the country at a national level in lots of different areas, but also locally for this region, I think is so important to make sure that momentum is continued in Newcastle. And that led me to my interest in the role and taking on that job this year. So it's been great.
Yeah, excellent. And, we caught up last week just before the podcast just to talk about, what's happening. Can you talk us through some of your objectives in the new role and where you see sort of the next period for you and what your focus will be?
Yeah, the membership of the Property Council, which is really diverse. So that's, people like yourself, but also people that work in surveying or planning, consultancies, environmental engineering, obviously property developers. The property industry make up at least 25% of the economy, across the nation. So it is talking to all those members and making sure we're articulating, their viewpoint with all levels of government. And obviously coming from government, I have a fairly good understanding of how that works in practice, particularly that state-local interaction. And that's where the rubber hits the road when you're talking about actual either service delivery or infrastructure delivery. It's mostly being done at that level of government. If it is public funding, obviously there is a significant amount done through the private sector and private investment.
Yeah, excellent. And one of the big topics this week has been the announcement for the rezoning for some key sites at the Broadmeadow Place Strategy, and we'll talk quite a bit about that. But yeah, and really it's a big part of Newcastle's future and future of housing and activation. Can you talk us through why that is so important and will that form a big part of your role as Property Council Director?
Yeah, absolutely. The direction the Property Council here in the Hunter and Central Coast had already determined was to support and advocate strongly for Broadmeadow. And part of that initial advocacy work was fantastically timed in that we went out with our position paper and asking for the first stage rezoning to happen, asking for a lead agency to be appointed in HCCDC to coordinate that work. And, quite quickly, the government moved, and credit to them, and made that announcement. So it's really the first important milestone of action happening on that site. And in some form or another, we had been working through my role in the city on advocating for that precinct over the last decade.
Yes,
and
a decade.
it goes back that long. There was an important milestone going back about 4 or 5 years. There was almost $7 million allocated through the state budget process to do the master planning work. But unfortunately, that stalled and stalled and stalled to go any further. So with a new government and a new planning minister was a great opportunity for a reset of that advocacy and then obviously to get that result. But really importantly, the city was at the heart of working with the Department of Planning to get the studies done, to do the work on the Broadmeadow Place Strategy. So the size and scale of this, for your Knight Frank listeners, it's 313 hectares.
Massive.
will be one of the largest brownfield urban renewal projects over the next 30 years in Australia. Now, several years ago, we put it on IA, Infrastructure Australia's list, because it's going to take all levels of government and obviously private sector to make this a reality. It's a complex site. It's in literally the heart of Newcastle. It has heavy rail. It has a proposed extension of light rail. It has some relatively major arterial roads. It has cycleways crossing it. So there's a whole integration of like probably one of the largest transit-oriented development sites in the state, if you count all that. But it also has the proposed high-speed rail coming in. So when you look at that mix of infrastructure, you look at the 20,000 homes that are projected into that site over the next 30 years, that's like picking up Tamworth and putting it in one suburb in the centre of Newcastle. Yeah. So that's an amazing undertaking, but I think it's that type of project is exactly what our city needs, and that's what our property council members have been advocating for some time. The size and scale, the complexity is big, but those challenges are important challenges to take on. And this is housing delivery, given we're in a housing crisis, but there's also significant jobs. The 2,700 just construction jobs with only the first 4 sites. Yep. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And that's just one sector. Yes. That doesn't include the consultancies, the planners. It's got issues with flooding. It'll have issues with contamination. It's not just housing and development. It's also a major entertainment precinct. And your listeners will know it's a home of the Newcastle Knights. It's where McDonald Jones Stadium sits. The proposal, and Infrastructure New South Wales has already listed this project in the last month, is to move the entertainment centre and actually co-locate it with the stadium. Yep. Now, that's Venues New South Wales. That's a different state government agency. So the size and scale of just that as an entertainment precinct and also a sporting precinct, housing and the like, all combined with obviously heavy rail, fast rail, light rail, road, it's big. Yes. And it needs coordination.
Yes. Well, that's sort of the next part of it. Is it really is being on both sides of the fence now. How difficult is it to coordinate all levels of government, local stakeholders, and this has been quite a planning process in the making. And how key is this, the recent announcement? Is that sort of the turning point, do you think, to really activate it, or was there still quite a bit of work to go? And how do you see all stakeholders working together, and what insights can you provide on that process?
Yeah, there's a huge amount of complexity to a site this big, and obviously you do need to stage it out over 30 years. The size, I cannot underestimate the size of this. So we had identified several catalyst precincts through the development of Australia's first metro plan. It's an abbreviation, so a metropolitan plan across the greater Newcastle area. Yep. It was the first metropolitan plan done in regional Australia, so outside of a capital, a number of years ago. Through that process, we identified key sites like the airport, the port, the university, Broadmeadow, Black Hill, and there's a couple of other sites in there, but we really focused on those key catalyst precincts. Yes. In doing so, lifted up the advocacy for the region. Yep. And made sure people were aware of these key sites. And we can see that there's been significant investment come into the airport and the port. And Broadmeadow is the complex piece in that puzzle that provides that housing and that future direction of urban infill rather than urban sprawl. Yes. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be greenfield development with matching infrastructure that's required right throughout the region, but it also has a really good context for where that can go over the next 30 years. It is a turning point because a consultation has been done, a number of planning studies have been done, and essentially what the announcement was, it showed a structure plan for the height that was allowed on different sites, but also the government has got skin in the game, New South Wales government, and said, we're rezoning the sites that we own and putting housing on them. Yep. And the target for the first stage is 3,200 homes. That's significant. And if you're listening to the commentary across the country around, sorry, if you're listening to the commentary around the country at the moment, everyone's talking about productivity, everyone's talking about private versus public investment, and the pendulum has tilted to government being one of the most significant investors and employers at the moment. That is not necessarily a sustainable situation when you look at the national economy. The private sector need to probably play a more significant role in the delivery of this type of infrastructure. It's not sustainable to have government pay and lead all of it, but to get it off the ground, I often find that you need government, particularly in Australia, to lead that charge, and potentially around the world, depending on, what country you're in. And that's exactly what happened when we did the renewal over the last 10 years of the city centre. It was government led, and the governments, state and federal, the ones with the money, well, that was $650 million from the sale of the port that went into the urban renewal project.
Yeah, excellent. And another big, and look, it's incredibly important, and it will take, it's a big project, but it's a very exciting one. And I'm getting a lot of feedback, through our contacts and stakeholders that they're excited about it as well, both in Newcastle and out of Newcastle. Another big project that is on the cards is the fast rail to Newcastle. And when we spoke, you felt this is one of our best chances to actually make it happen at the moment. Can you talk us through how realistic you think it is that we will get fast rail, and what can you see as the steps actually leading to that happening?
Look, the Fast Rail Authority is up and running, excuse the pun. They have a shop front here in Newcastle. I was invited to to a high-speed rail conference just this week in Sydney, where the federal member Sharon Claydon spoke, and she was very optimistic about the delivery in the future of high-speed rail, but obviously the planning that's happening at the moment by the authority on behalf of the federal government. So there has been significant funding put forward, particularly for the Newcastle to Sydney route and the development of that route. And for all the reasons you can imagine, it's 1 hour from Newcastle to Sydney. It's half an hour from the Central Coast to Newcastle or to Sydney. Yep. And there's all these reasons why you potentially don't need to spend that much money delivering this type of infrastructure. People could think of a myriad of them, but I have a different view, and that would be the view that I've always taken around wanting not just Newcastle, but us as a nation to actually invest in this type of nation building infrastructure. And essentially the whole Broadmeadow precinct is nation building. What is happening, or what could happen in the Central Coast, the types of businesses that are in the Central Coast, and that's everything from agricultural and food supply to manufacturing, both light and heavy manufacturing, those types of networks that move people to where they need to be, whether it's for jobs or friends and family, only improve the quality of life of the people living in those areas. There is a huge population living between Newcastle and Sydney. And being able to allow mobility to happen at those paces, you can see that Japan delivered this type of infrastructure in the 60s. Like, we're literally one of the last OECD countries to even consider proposals like this. And if you look at it from a national perspective, the vision that the federal government have to move population and people and goods between Brisbane and Melbourne is the right type of vision for the country. Is this project going to be easy? No. Is it going to be expensive? Yes. And honestly, was revitalising Newcastle and doing urban transformation here, or just change in general, difficult over 10 years? Absolutely difficult. Is it worth it? Yes. Yep. It's always worth it. Yep. So that's my view, and I'm sure, and I'm sure because the federal member articulated those views just this week. So there is momentum behind that project, and if it taps into a precinct where there's going to be potentially 20,000 new homes, that's additional to the other growth that's happening in this region, and allows an improved quality of life, improved livability, and allows people to either, visit friends and family allows the growth of tourism, and it also allows people to transit between jobs. And I know people have different ways of working now, but there is a level of productivity that occurs when people are face to face.
Yep.
That does not happen as to the same degree when you're always online or meeting online.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So we've been speaking a lot about the future, and there's some really exciting and big plans there. But I'd like to sort of reflect on some of your time as mayor, and I suppose starting off, what do you see as one of your proudest moments, or what are you so proud of during your time as mayor?
If I took an in globo look at it, it's that what we've been talking about, the overall transformation. I think you will look back at those 10 years and you'll see this marked step change in the city.
Yeah.
And it's a visible change. You can see the investment that has come into Newcastle. You can see the new homes that have been built, and you can see that focus on urban renewal, repositioning the city in the minds of people that live outside of Newcastle, like across the state, across the country, even to a smaller degree internationally, was one of those challenges we wanted to take on. So making sure that we sold Newcastle outside of Newcastle and the benefits of it, because we needed that external investment to realise that growth that we've seen in Newcastle. So those were having that ability for 10 years to be able to shape that and drive it and see that visible change is, I'm very proud of it and very thankful for that opportunity. And I think a lot of people see Newcastle differently. People that are young people growing up now and going to school, they have no idea what it was like when we were young, and the challenges it took for anyone to agree on anything or actually make a tough decision and get it done.
Yes.
So it's that there's like the technical things when you look back at the infrastructure delivery, just being responsible for that from my own end at the city was, okay, we're not spending enough on our own assets, and they're not at a standard that are acceptable for not only local residents, but for people that want to visit. How do you sell Newcastle to the world if you don't have that standard? So that investment was significant, and we're talking $1 billion over 10 years of us investing in our works program and projects through the city. And that's for everything from new roads and roads renewal to the Newcastle Ocean Bars to the art gallery redevelopment. I could list a laundry list of projects. But if you did a comparison to the previous 10 years, it would be tenfold. Yes. Literally a tenfold investment of public money into public infrastructure. It's huge. And the benefits are huge because the matching funds that come from that, from the private sector, is what drives economic growth, which drives opportunity, prosperity, better quality of life. Yep. They're the outcomes.
Yeah. It's been an incredible period of transformation for Newcastle. And as you say, even if you look at the 10 years prior, it's been massive. And drilling down into some of the key pillars of that, the truncation of the heavy rail and the light rail coming in, a contentious issue at the time, and probably some legacy issues. And what can you talk us through that period and how difficult it was actually to navigate all of that process and delivery of that and all the all the weird, wonderful things that come with doing something like that?
Yeah, so there's a huge amount of politics involved in it, and there's a level of practicality as well, and there's also the notion that there's limited funds to try and solve that issue, because it was an issue that got debated in Newcastle, like in a hot contest, I'm going to say probably for 30 years to 40 years, like hot topic for 30 or 40 years that nothing ever happened on. But you can trace it back to about at least a debate that started almost 100 to 90 years ago. Maybe not as hot a topic back then, but imagine talking about something for 40 years and no one did anything about it. I mean, that's what Newcastle was known for, not just that and the heavy rail discussion. It was everything. Like there wasn't an image that you could do any business here or invest here because the answer would be no. The answer was no, 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 no. So I'm yes, 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 with caveats. Like my first position is, well, that's a good idea. These are the challenges, but how can we make it work? So you don't always get what you want. I mean, it's not exactly how I would have done it or wanted it, but some of those decisions were not mine. So I had to deal with the New South Wales government went, no, we're cutting it, and this is where we're cutting it. I probably would not have made the same decision. But we're promising you light rail. And I said, okay, well, great, make sure you deliver it. And then there was this whole situation went on behind the scenes where they went, okay, we're just going to dump the rest of this onto the local council. You've got a new mayor, which I've been experiencing in local government. We've got a new mayor from a different political party. We'll make this their problem. So I was like, okay, you can make it my problem. We will work through this. But there was an undertow that councils notoriously just argue with each other and don't actually achieve anything. We can probably just get them to argue with each other for a while. They won't take any heat for this. They never do. And we'll just take our $650 million and spend it back in Sydney where we probably want to spend it anyway. That's literally kind of no one said that, but that was the undertow. Like, if you want to sit on this for a while or make this, difficult or whatever the case, we'll just shut that down and we'll board it up and you can have some tumbleweeds. And I was like, no, no, that's not going to work for me. But you're also not, from my perspective, it's a tiny rail corridor. It's contaminated land and parts of it sit, visually between a heritage area and the harbour. This is not like, your ideal peak. Like Broadmeadow is a good size, 313 hectares for development. And that's the thing, you've got to be targeted about where you want the development. This is not a development opportunity. This is an urban renewal opportunity. Yeah. So they had plans. Oh, we're going to put, blocks of towers right across it. I thought, oh, well, if you want to infuriate Novocastrians and make sure nothing ever happens, try and go ahead with that plan. So I was like, no, you are not doing that. This is a very small area. This is a heritage area. This all has to be parkland. So they gave us the rezoning. So we said, no, this is rezoning. Just use the land for, public education, university or social and affordable housing. It's only a tiny strip. And that's what eventually happened. But there was a whole process that went on behind that to get that outcome. Then they also wanted to run the route half on the corridor and half on the road. My advice was one or the other. Do you really need to have it, going like this through the city? Because you can't just have it for 2.6 kilometres. It has to then continue on. You have to have a plan for the future. And how do you continue it on from where you're locating it? But they did what they did. The next challenge, if you want me to list them all out, was the government went, okay, we're just delivering light rail. We're ripping up the middle of the road and we're not doing any other work. We haven't budgeted for that. I went, pardon? So there were, all of the work between the light rail corridor right up to the shop fronts. I had to have an argument with the minister at the time, Andrew Constance. I won. He yelled at me though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then got a news camera and yelled at the news camera something, I don't know what he said, complained about me, but then I still got the money. Good. So thankfully we didn't just get the road cut up because it's very disruptive. It was tough on local businesses. And we got the whole public amenity done. So it is what it is. Yeah. And it works, but it does need extension. So that was the next phase of that. The reason why we got so involved is because I did not, once we lost the heavy rail, because it's really important to move people and have a public transport. You cannot have a city with aspirations to be a global city and for people to live here and invest here if you do not have effective public transport. Now, there's a way to go on that still, but once you remove it, it has to be replaced. So that replacement, and this is what rail does, whether it's high speed, whether it's light, whether it's trams, whether it's heavy rail, it delivers certainty. And that was another pillar that when I was elected, I wanted certainty. If you were going to come to the council with a proposal, whether it was a development application, whether it was I want to do an event on a park or whatever that might be, just give people certainty. Don't say yes one day and no the next. There's a reason why you would have some, rules in place or what you can and can't do on whether it's a development or an event or what it might be, but give people certainty. And certainty creates an environment where people can make plans, whether that's investment plans, whether it's their family plans. If there's a stable, consistent environment, people will be attracted to it. So having a stable, consistent operating environment within the organisation and stable and consistent rules, whether they are development rules, whatever that might be. And that was the general notion, the principle behind, people wanting to invest here, knowing what, if they followed the rules, this would be the outcome. Yep. So the certainty of rail, wherever you are around the world, this is the same. It's been studied numerous times. And that the difference between buses and rail or in non-certain pieces of transport infrastructure. It brings investment. So once those announcements were made, you saw, there'd been land banking along Hunter Street for years because people that knew, which is just locals mainly.
It absolutely was the catalyst for
Yeah.
a massive amount of activation. And having lived on both sides of the pre-truncation and post-truncation, the amount of development that was triggered by the light rail being put in. There was a lot of, obviously, you mentioned it, businesses did suffer and there was a lot of disruption, but it triggered a lot of development, a lot of investment. The confidence that the investment by the public sector was put in, as that's led to incredible projects. And even looking at the East End, the work that's going down, the mall was dead. Like, it was a dead mall
for a long time.
For a long, long, long time. You say nothing gets done in Newcastle. That was a legacy. And you look at it now. I suppose looking at that now, it must be quite proud to see that all sort of being activated and invested in and actually getting out of the ground as well. So I think, just projects like that, I think are incredible for this. For what's occurred there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, the plan there was once we could deal with the rezoning and build some confidence with the community, and we slowed the process down. And that was my advice to urban growth at the time. I said, you need to actually have an education piece on what urban renewal is, what it means, bring the community in and give them back public space in this process. Do not take away what is public space. Protect the heritage of the East End, because we have an LEP, a city centre LEP, local environment plan, that has really high building heights in the West End of Newcastle. They've been there for years. No one's taken them up. So the plan was bring the community on that journey. The decision's been made by the New South Wales government. Make sure we keep the 650 million, make sure we keep the certainty of rail tracks, and then get an anchor at each end, someone that will with deep pockets, because it's going to be a long project to do the revitalisation of the mall and change that use completely. And then you've got the two mine seeps that need a grouting underneath. Yeah. That's a whole other situation. I mean, Iris pumped grout for 12 months before they even started construction. Like, that's how difficult these sites are. When I say deep pockets and time, so that's, stage 1 is amazing, and stage 2's basically complete, and 3 and 4 being put together and finally got approval. That's a whole other story. But having that an investor outside of Newcastle come in to spend that money and see that vision through, and that included voluntarily reducing building heights. Yeah, people forget that there were crazy towers that were never going to work in that heritage area, but there was an area at the West End that was zoned for towers. And I think I told you this.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, this is a great dovetail into the next bit, because a big part of that transformation over the 10 years was shifting council over to the West End as well. That was quite contentious at the time, but I suppose it'd be good to hear some of your insights about that. And that sort of dovetails into what you say. You've had this area zoned in the city with available land, with the height limits available. I think putting aside the property piece, the show of confidence of coming for the council to move out to the west and start to, lead by example, I think was, from my perspective, well received. So what was, what was the thought process behind that? And obviously contentious at the time, but reflecting on it, how do you think it all went, and what are your thoughts from there?
Oh, it's a great outcome.
Mm.
It was only contentious because some political opponents made it contentious, and it doesn't take much for people to get a profile opposing.
Yes.
It's just a typical, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that.
Mm.
So people may or may not know there's quite an iconic civic building called the Roundhouse,
Yes.
where council had been located, and it was, it's brutalist, very unique architecture. Personally, I think it's a great building. I think buildings that are different and unique like that make a city. But was it practical for government services? Literally, the building was round. Everything in it had to be bespoke.
Yep.
There were no meeting rooms. Council had outgrown it years before I became the Lord Mayor.
Yeah.
The staff were in temporary locations, in different rented sites across the city. So there's a project put in place. Even before my time, there was a few projects put in
Yes.
place with proposals of moving, so all of the staff that weren't located at the depot could be located together in terms of getting, better ways of working, better collaboration. And like I said, we weren't the first council to ever contemplate this. It's just no one had ever got it done or made a decision.
Yeah.
So there'd been studies done about what would be a good future use of that building. And one of them that came out quite strongly was it would make a great hotel. Just the layout of it, the uniqueness of it. And obviously we did the project where we, moved council to the West End, et cetera, which was, had fantastic outcomes. And I can't even tell you, 2019 before COVID hit, it was like no one missed a beat. There was heaps of local government areas that shut down during COVID because they didn't even have enough licenses for people to log on to their, people were coming in and bringing, grabbing their, full PCs and office desks. Everyone was already in the cloud, and we'd already established all these new ways of working internally. Like the staff did an amazing job at that. So it was transformational for the organisation. And let me be clear, you can't deliver anything without great people. And great people work at the City of Newcastle. And backing them in was also really, really important during my time. Now, they don't always make decisions or, get it right, but 9 times out of 10 they do. And they're passionate. They're working for the city because they're passionate about the city. So backing them in and making sure they knew that at that level they were going to be supported was important, because one of the 101 easiest things to do if you're a politician and got nothing else better to do with your time, just throw some staff under the bus. They do it all the time. And I cannot believe they get away with it. Like, they count that as work. That's not work. That's mean. And that's not actually doing anything. So I just was like shutting down that culture in that process. So we moved to the West End. I spent a lot of time studying in the urban renewal space before I was a Lord Mayor, because I had 6 years as a councillor. And I was a deputy chair and chair of the Urban Design and Review Committee and things like that. So I'd really put a lot of time and effort into studying what was best practice around the world, broadening out those networks. There's really simple things, hospitals, universities, great anchors for economic development for cities. But so is government, and so are government employees. So if you want to revitalise an area and you actually are serious about it, move your 400 staff there and have them working in that location and spending money in the local economy. So that's, was just part of everything. Was a systems approach. There was never one strategy that was alone. It was part of a broader system. Yes, it was allowing the investment into the Roundhouse, over $30 million into what is basically now a heritage iconic building in Newcastle that is fit for purpose as a 5-star hotel. So that's a great investment, international investment. Our staff have upgraded facilities. So we've invested in our staff, which was fantastic. And they appreciated it, and it improved their productivity and their working. Particularly, got to remember those couple of years during COVID where the city won awards for the work they did because they could actually work and were supported through that process. And then we also have 400 people, when it wasn't COVID, like today, working in and around this building, activating the West End. So that was also incredibly important, that show of confidence And if we aren't prepared to invest in our vision and our strategy, well, then you can't very well expect the private sector to come in, can you?
No, I couldn't agree more. And look, you only need to look out the window today. There's cranes in the sky. There's buildings going up, and there's a lot more pipeline work in this area. So definitely led from the front there. I suppose to round it out, it's been great to sort of go through it. But now looking ahead for the next, say, 12 to 24 months in your new role and all the big projects that we're working on and in the city, what will be your focus as Director of the Property Council for Newcastle and Central Coast? What is going to be the next sort of steps for you? And to finish off, why should anyone look at investing in Newcastle?
Well, for all the reasons I just mentioned, but really importantly, it's during that time, like we talked a lot about the CBD renewal because it was, a complex and ongoing project. But during that time, we did a lot of work more regionally with all the mayors across the Hunter and also tapping into that broader network across New South Wales and the country. And I think some of those bigger projects, when you're advocating for them like Broadmeadow, and that will remain the Property Council's focus on that site and what happens next. After this government investment and the coordination, what happens next? We want to make sure that investment is continued, that the entertainment precinct is also funded. The funding has been mooted for the entertainment centre. We want to make sure that's funded as well. So it's looking at some of the devil is in the detail about getting through some of those hoops, looking at the transport integration into that. Anything that's inhibiting development. So there's been issues around mining related lands and their reuse in Lake Macquarie, which sort of ties into the mine grounding fund here in Newcastle. So they're both we're in an area where there's a lot of legacy mining issues that need to be investigated that on either particular changes in how government apply policy or regulation or investment can actually open up capital to drive investment. In areas up in the Hunter, that's for land that is not used for mining, that cannot necessarily be used for housing, but can be potentially used for employment lands. That doesn't necessarily have those zonings at the moment, and that still ties back to the mine grouting issue here in the CBD. Also, we're very interested in the delivery and the supply of social and affordable housing. And there's been 2 rounds of Housing Australia Future Fund money delivered. There's a 3rd round coming up. But in those first 2 rounds, most of regional areas across the country were not included. And that, from the information that our members have done and the work they have done in that advocacy area, was because of the way that funding was structured. So focusing on making sure we're getting our fair share of funding that is delivering that mix of housing supply for the region. Another big issue, if I'm allowed another one, and this is important for the region, and it's that Cessnock to Maitland corridor where we're going to see a huge amount of housing growth. And there's also the biodiversity changes that have sterilised a lot of potentially developable land because it's a blanket map. It's not nuanced. It's not nuanced to where the riparian corridors are, where the biodiversity actually is. There needs to be some refinement of that because there's a huge potential to create homes in really affordable areas that do need matching infrastructure and transport and actually grow this region. And it's for this region, and almost the same issues and coordination issues apply in the Central Coast in terms of that advocacy work. So they're going to be the focuses of my time at the moment.
Yeah, you're going to be kept busy.
Yeah, which I like.
Yeah,
and because I'm passionate about this area, it really ties into work. But it's really nice working with the sector, and to be honest with you, being out of politics, I love it.
Well, look, no, it's great to see adding a bit of firepower to the property council's already great work, and some more advocacy. There's some exciting times ahead, some big plans, and it's going to be great to see the transformation of Newcastle and the Hunter over the next decade. So thanks very much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Well, that's all from us. We'll be sure to keep you updated throughout the year.